Hey everybody, I'm Jeanette, a self-professed true crime nerd, and welcome to the Law and Murder Podcast, where we're going to be talking about true crime and exonerations. You ready? Let's get started. Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. If my voice sounds a little raunchy, I have a cold this week, so we're just going to get through this thing together, okay? All right. For this week, I'm going to take you to Boone, Kentucky. The year is going to be 1994. This story was kind of scary to me because I have a teenager of my own, and it just kind of helped me to, it just kind of reminded me that I kind of need to just pay attention to my kid, his moods, going back and forth thing. With this case, I'm by no means making anything anybody's fault. I just think in the 90s, we didn't talk about mental health like we did today. We weren't as observant. We weren't as open about telling people our business. I think back then, I was a kid, but everybody kind of minded their own business. A lot of things were private. Family stuff was private. And I feel like now we're starting to get opened about these things, which is a great thing, but in some ways it's a little bit too much. But for situations like this, I think that it's very important to be attentive to the highs and the lows that our kids are going through. And sometimes it's just teenage junk, and then sometimes it's serious stuff, and we need to be vigilant about getting it out of our kids. And I'm very passionate about talking to my kid and speaking wisdom into him and, all that stuff. But anyway, let's get started. Clay, his mom Becky, dad Walter, and two sisters, Kristen and Lauren, were from Boone, Kentucky. He was your average high school kid. He had good grades, had a pretty easy time making friends. Some people thought he was weird, just like everybody in high school. And he was a moody 17-year-old teenager. Clay also didn't get along with his parents, which we can all relate to that too. I can most definitely relate to this because me and my parents, we fought a lot because they raised me like I was living in the 50s with them and not in the 90s. But it's all good. I came out all right. We went through our stuff, but I came out better than I think we all thought I was going to. So anyway, his parents were very successful, and he had a super big house that in the 90s I would have considered a mansion. Their home was beautifully decorated, and everything had its place. The Shrout family was a church-going family who had appeared to have it all. His dad was the CEO of a paper company, and his mom stayed home. They were active in the community, and his sisters loved riding horses and hanging out with their friends. To you and I, they may have looked like the perfect family. But perception is a mother, isn't it? I can't tell you how many people I've looked at and assumed that they had it all together, and their lives were like a legit mess. I don't mean that to be rude or anything. I mean, everybody's got problems. Everybody's got issues. And I thought that, certain people in my life had all their stuff together. They had money, so they were good. They were pretty, so they were good. And it just wasn't as it appeared to be. I don't know if anybody thinks that I have it all together. I tend to be a little bit rough around the edges sometimes, but I definitely don't. I have issues of my own. Anyhow, the perception, just like all the other families I told you about, were that, man, they had it all. I never would have thought that this would have happened to them. Everybody says that all the time, right? But really, what does a murderer look like? You've got people that look crazy, like Charles Manson, and you've got people that look normal, like Ted Bundy. There's no real look to a killer. I mean, let's just get that out of our heads, because anybody can kill anybody. Anybody can snap. This can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter if you're addicted to drugs, an alcoholic, you're poor, you're rich. Murder doesn't have a type, just like cancer doesn't have a type. Clay was a collector of weapons. He had a bunch of them in his room, and he really enjoyed messing around with them. But even more, his thing was collecting them. It would seem that they would give him power and protection. His parents knew this. They knew that he favored these weapons and these things. And because Clay was a normal teenager, being disrespectful and whatnot, he would get grounded. And the first thing that his parents would take away from him were his weapons. I mean, that was his weak spot, and his parents knew it. I think we all do that as parents, don't we? Like, we always take what our kids love. Like with my teenager, we take away his computer, and like we basically Not literally punch him in the gut, but taking the computer away is kind of like punching him in the gut, right? So Clay's parents did the same thing. They took away his weapons. He hated it. They started arguing. He would get mad at his parents, and I don't know. I wasn't really always happy with my parents during my teenage years either. So I can get where he's coming from. I mean, I'm raising a teenager myself, and it is not easy. But anyway, Clay was having a bit of a bad string of luck in his life as of late. Clay had been dating a girl and asked her to go to prom with him, and she did, but later rejected him. This event left him feeling a little bit low. And I mean, who wants to be rejected, especially in high school? I mean, that's the place pretty much. It's like your second home, and everybody knows everybody else's business, especially when it comes to relationship stuff. Like, everybody knows your crap. I don't know. A few days after the prom, Clay had brought a stun gun to school. He got caught with it because he was messing around with it in class, and the principal took it away. The school, of course, called his parents, and when he got home, he and his father got into a fight, and he lost all his weapons. So now, girl rejected him. He brings a stun gun to school and gets grounded. His life is literally like over. He got really sick of all this, taking my weapons away, the girl rejecting him, and all this stuff, and he decided that he was over it, and he was going to either grab all his stuff and run away, or he was going to kill his parents. So later on in the evening, Clay went down to his father's car where he knew his dad had kept a gun. He grabbed the gun, took the magazine out, taught himself how to use the gun, put the magazine back in the gun, and took it to his room with him and set his alarm to wake up at 5 in the morning. Clay's alarm goes off at 5 a.m. He gets out of bed and gets ready for school. Only the decision that he had to make the night before was made. He was going to take the life of his family because his parents irritated his life and stopped him from doing so many things. And his sisters, they couldn't live without parents, so he justified their killing that way. He grabs the gun, makes sure that it's loaded. He first goes into his parents' room and shoots his mother in the head while she's sleeping. He shot his father next. Thinking that he's dead, he leaves his parents' room and goes to his older sister's room. She was already awake because of the gunshots, but he shot his sister in the head before she could even get out of bed. He then walks into his little sister's room, and she's awake sitting up on the bed. She says hi to her brother and tells him about the awesome dream that she was having. While she's talking, he moves just out of her line of sight and shoots his sister in the head as well. Thinking that he killed his family, he goes to get ready to leave the house and drive. But he hears a noise. So he walks back into his parents' room and sees his father sitting up in bed, trying to use the phone to call 911, and he shoots him twice to make sure that he's gone. He grabs the keys to his father's car and starts driving to school. Clay is literally in a state of shock, and he starts driving around town, and he noticed that he had gotten lost because he was driving aimlessly. He stops at a gas station and picks up an apple juice, gets back in the car, and decides that he's going to go to school. On the way to school, he stops at his old prom date's house. He knocks on the door, and she opens. He grabs her by the arm, pushes her into the car, shows her the gun, and he starts making his way to school. Clay walks into school as if nothing has happened. He walks right into the class that he's supposed to be in, his trigonometry class, and walks in the door with his hostage. He tells her to go sit down, and he shows the class that he has a gun in his hand and waves it to the class. His trig teacher looks at him and calmly asks him what he wants them to do. He tells his teacher that he had a very bad day and all he wants to do is sit down. He slowly walks to the teacher's chair and takes a seat at her desk. She looks at him again and asks him what he wants her to do. He tells her that he just needs to sit down and that she can teach the class and keep things normal as if he wasn't there. So this is exactly what she does. She turns to the board and continues working out the math problem that she had already started, and the kids in the class were scared as heck. I mean, wow, there's a kid in your classroom with a gun. At this time, I'm pretty sure that the school shooting thing was really unreal to them. I can't remember what date they started, but I want to say it was after maybe late 90s. I don't know. But can you imagine just sitting there staring at someone who has a gun? You can't move because he might shoot you. Running out in chaos pretty much guarantees that you're going down, or at least that he starts shooting. So you remain calm as the panic shoots through your veins and you're fighting so hard to calm your flight response with extreme discipline. Can you imagine just staring at him, hoping and praying that he leaves that gun alone? Well, that's what all the kids in this class did. A few minutes later, a student looks into the window of the classroom and the teacher takes the opportunity to mouth to the student that there's a gun in the classroom, and the kid goes and tells the vice principal that there's a gun in the school. The vice principal also stays calm. He tells the front office to start activating the plan for an emergency and to call the cops to put the school on lockdown. He takes it upon himself to walk over to the classroom and attempt to get this hostage situation between the vice principal and Clay, and not between the class and Clay. He walks into the room and looks at Clay while he tells the class to leave the room. Clay allows this to happen. The vice principal's frame of mind for even going to the classroom in the first place was that if he stormed into the classroom and got to Clay fast enough, the vice principal would have the time to push the gun into his stomach and allow everyone else in the classroom to get out. Thank goodness that didn't happen. He had said that it's better to have one life gone than 30 and to bring complete chaos to the school. So everybody in the classroom leaves and the vice principal is alone with Clay. And he asked Clay for the gun. Clay thought about it for a minute or two and finally gave the gun to the vice principal. A few minutes after this happened, the police arrive expecting complete chaos, and one of the officers walks into the classroom to find Clay still sitting in his teacher's chair. At this point, the police officer asks why he brought a gun to school, and Clay tells the police officer that he had a bad day, and the reason for that bad day is that he had killed his whole entire family. At first, the cop thought he was joking, but then he started to describe what he had done, and he had taken Clay very seriously, so he sent units out to Clay's house. Everybody at this time just thought that Clay was a little off in just bringing a gun to school. Nobody had associated bringing the gun to school with murder. Clay didn't call anybody. He just left, and in his mind, he did the next right thing by going to school. I think he was just kind of going into autopilot because what he had done, even though it was something that he had planned to do, I don't like his mind really grasped everything and he was in some sort of shock. So the police go to the Shrout home and they find his parents and his sisters in bed shot just the way that Clay had left them earlier that morning. When the police questioned Clay as to why he did it, he said that he was mad at his parents because they took his weapons away, and they always took his weapons when something happened, and his mom frustrated him all the time, and he got along with his father well, but his mom just really bothered him for some reason. And later on, I found that he had said that his mom had sexually abused him in the bathtub, and his father found out about it and didn't really say anything. So if that's true, maybe that's where that unsettled resentment came from. He was also really angry with his parents because they told him what he was going to be and what he was going to do with his life, and he felt very controlled. And he just wanted to live his life the way that he wanted to. He didn't want to be a replica of his parents or be the man that his parents had expected him to be. So Clay goes to court and he gets a life sentence plus, I want to say it was some extra time for kidnapping his old prom date. A few weeks ago, he was up for parole. And the parole officers had asked him what he had done and why he had done it. Now, as a 42-year-old man, he says that the year before he killed his parents, he used drugs more and more, and things in his life had just popped. He felt detached and just got the gun out of the car the night before with the plan to kill his parents. He says that things made sense to him then, and he now knows that it wasn't rational, and he can't take it back. And the fact remains that his parents are gone and he can never bring them back, and the same with his sisters. So the parole officers had asked him, "Do you think you deserve to be paroled?" He said, "I don't think I deserve to be alive." He said that he broke something he couldn't fix and he doesn't feel like he's a threat. He's not a threat to mankind, but no, he's fully admitted to the parole officers that he doesn't deserve to be paroled for his actions, which I think is probably the only honorable thing that he did, with the exception of the fact that he pleaded guilty to killing his family. So we'll see what happens with that one. He's got a couple more days for the parole board to make their decision. So it's unknown right now if he's going to get parole or he's not. But I imagine that he's probably not. So I have one more case for you today. I wasn't going to do this one because I didn't really find very much information on it. But I did the research on it, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started on that one. So we're again back in 2008. In Iowa, and it's the same time as the other stories that I told you a few weeks ago that had another familicide, and this one also happened around Easter of that year. It seems that 2008 was a super hard year for families, and I mean, compared to the 3 that these guys messed up, it seemed that they do whatever it took for their families not to be inconvenienced with their own financial struggles, even to death. Stephen Sueppel was married to Cheryl, and together they had adopted 4 children from South Korea: Ethan, Seth, Mira, and Eleanor. They, for all intents and purposes, were a very happy family that went to church. They had a clean record financially and criminally. Like everybody else, everyone that knew them considered them happy, content. They had everything. They were great people in the community. Nobody would have ever thought that anything bad would have happened to this family. The night before Easter of 2008, Stephen started making some phone calls to answering machines. He had decided that he was going to take his life and the life of his family due to his financial burdens. He needed everybody to know what and why he did what he did. This would be his way of leaving suicide notes. He was apologetic and felt sorrowful for his family before he had even committed the act. When you're depressed and have nowhere to turn and everyone knows your business, especially your financial business, your whole world is literally gone. In Stephen's mind, his world was already shattered. He was the vice president of a company, and he was caught stealing over $500,000 from the company over the span of several years. The company had taken him to court. He did the right thing and owned up to his wrongdoings and quit his job the very day he was caught. He had gone to court in February of 2008 to face the federal charges. After he had gone to the federal court for the initial hearing, it was all over the news, and he couldn't hide from his sins. He decided that going through the entire court process wasn't worth it. And at 11:30, the night before he was going to murder his family, he called his old place of employment and told them that he was going to kill his family and himself, and that he was sorry for what he'd done. He also left messages to his father, his brother, and wrote a 4-page note and left it on the table for the police to find when they walked in the door. After he made his phone calls, it was suspected that he killed his wife first. She had endured blunt force trauma to the head and chest. He must have felt bad about what he did for his wife because he put all of his kids into the minivan in the garage with the intentions of killing them by carbon monoxide poisoning. But when that didn't work, he resorted to killing his children in the same manner that he killed his wife. At 6:36 a.m., the day of Easter, he called 911 and told the operator to send the police to his home, left his address with the operator, and hung up the phone. While the police were on their way, he left his home in the family minivan. According to some 911 calls, it was reported that Stephen was driving really fast, more than likely over 80 miles an hour, swerving in between cars on the highway and driving extra recklessly. He then turned the wheel into the median and crashed into a concrete signpost on the highway. His car was immediately set on fire, and Steve Sueppel was dead. This was about 6 minutes after he called the 911 operator. The police had arrived at the home and found the Sueppel family dead. His wife and children were all in separate bedrooms of the home, and once they removed them from the home and began the investigation, they found that the family's minivan was gone. It took several days for the police to figure out that Stephen was indeed Stephen because the intensity of the fire pretty much burned him to the point where they couldn't identify him, so they had to wait for DNA to come back. They already had a pretty good idea, though, because of the minivan and the fact that it was missing from the home and there wasn't any stolen minivans reported. They were very confident that Stephen was the one that was in the car. I couldn't find anything on what the note said other than the fact that he had apologized for the fact that he had stolen the money and that he didn't want himself or his family to go through the burden of him going to court and his family living without him while he was in jail. So he felt absolutely desperate, super depressed, and found himself nowhere to go, and that was the only way out, because the only other way was for him to go to court and go to jail. So it seems that throughout all of the Familicide cases that I showed you, with the exception of Clay's case, because he was a child that had killed his family, the MO pretty much fits. Pretty successful guy. Everybody thinks that they have everything. Very interactive into the community, and financial woes, at least in 2008 anyway, have gotten in the way. The other cases that are very known, like Chris Watts and Christian Longo and all those other cases that are pretty much oversaturated with information, they were basically in the same thing. They were known in the community, a lot of people liked them, and they all ran into financial issues, which I think that's probably one of the biggest factors when it comes to somebody killing their entire family. And it's just my thought that because they are so into the community and they're so known and they have this picture of themselves as Christians and community leaders and very successful, them getting caught for stealing this money puts so much shame to them that they go and they commit these acts because they can't handle the shame. So it really becomes about them, and they take their family with him because the family is an entire unit to them. It's not me and my wife and my kids, it's we are all one. So they take that to the point where they take their family as well. It's really, really sad, and I think that the more that people talk about this stuff and try and find similarities and do some research on this phenomenon, I guess if you want to call it that, the better we are at getting people help. Obviously, you're not always going to know, but I mean, just keep tabs on your spouse and just check in every once in a while. And you may not even know that they have financial issues, but the more dialogue you have in your relationships, the better off you're going to be, because it's going to be a safe place for you both to come together and have that space that you guys can talk to each other so that it's not something that you have to hide. The more open you are, the less likely you are to hide things from the people that you love. Next week, I'm going to go with a wrongful conviction. I watched a documentary and I saw this lady on it, and I kind of wanted to dig into her case a little bit because she got a really, really bad deal. So I'm going to do that case next week. Until then, have a good one. Hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to the show, and if you love the show, please leave a review on iTunes, and it would be even better if you shared it with your friends and got the word out. Until next time, bye.